What was Don DeLillo's writing routine? Well, of course, we have to talk about it because Right Conscious is the headquarters of everything related to Don DeLillo here on YouTube. And if you guys want more DeLillo videos, just check out the playlist down below and you can watch some more when this video is done. And I somewhat hate the writing routine videos because they have been somewhat fetishized. And of course, we all have our own writing routine. And I'm not going to sit here and do one of those videos like, I tried Don DeLillo's writing routine out for 18 days and this is what I learned. But I think it's important in a large set of data, like if you take 100 writers you like and look at all the routines to find the similarities because they are important. Because what I have found with many writers is that if I look at that data set and some of the big things, most writers aren't doing them. And so that makes you an outlier. That makes you trying to be different than the typical successful author. And so I also need to give a pre-warning before we kind of hear from DeLillo that we are talking about a literary fiction GOAT right here, like one of the best American literary fiction authors ever. And so in this video, I'm going to be talking about reaching that standard, because if you want to reach that standard, everyone basically has the same routine at that level. If you want to fall a bit short and still become a full-time author and have people love your work and transform a ton of people, that's awesome. But this video is about literary fiction, avant-garde, top of the top writing routine. Because Don DeLillo's is the same basically as everyone else's. And so let's now hear about it. Writing is a concentrated form of thinking. I don't know what I think about certain subjects, even today, until I sit down and try to write about them. I work in the morning in a manual typewriter. I do about 4 hours and then go running. This helps me shake off one world and enter another. Trees, birds, drizzle. It's a nice kind of interlude. Then I work again later afternoon for 2 or 3 hours. And so this is huge. Let's talk about numbers really fast. DeLillo is writing 7 hours a day, and I've seen other quotes by him, and he basically writes every single day. And so let's assume he takes 65 days off per year. So if we times 300 times 7, obviously that's 2,100, but let's call it 2,000 hours. Then if you look at kind of the separation between, Don DeLillo novels, they are at the start of his career somewhat short. His first 3 novels had only 1 year of separation between them. But this is something interesting. Every single time that DeLillo takes it to the next level and writes something I think that really changes his career and are some of the more monumental works, he takes much more time. So for instance, between Great Jones Street, which I liked, and Ratner Star. And Ratner Star is very influential. It was David Foster Wallace's favorite Don DeLillo book. I've heard so many people talk about it. It's a magnificent novel, confusing novel, flawed novel, but still 3 years between that. So we can say that maybe he worked on that for 2 years. So we have about 4,000 hours of work. Then once again, when we get to White Noise, he writes The Names in 1982. Then he takes 3 years to release White Noise. 3 years. So we could say another 4,000 to 5,000 hours. The same with Libra. 3-year gap. That's the next level for him. Libra is a legendary novel. Mao 2, one of his other classics, one that I would recommend if you've never read DeLillo before. Another 3 years. And then between Mao 2 and one could say his penultimate piece, he takes 6 years to write Underworld, which would equate that if we say he worked on it for 5 of those 6 years, around 10,000 hours to release something which many people believe is one of the best American fiction books of the 20th century. And so when I look at the literary fiction goats behind me, they are also all writing at least 3,000 to 4,000 hours per book, and others are getting close to up to 10,000 hours if we're talking about Cormac McCarthy and David Foster Wallace and others. And so when you also look at their routine, one of the important things that you need to remember is that they are actually putting in deep work. They lived in a time before cell phones, and many of them even were anti-television in these things. They all had offices, so they would walk into an office. They weren't at Starbucks. They would walk into a silent room. Their family and everybody knew what was going on, and they would work for that entire 7 hours. Because I hear people talk about their hours, and I've then watched them work or kind of taught to them deeper, and they're checking. Like, I have a buddy who's a writer, and sometimes I'll send him a text message, or really an email. I don't text message, but I'll send him an email, and then he'll email me back, and then we'll be chatting a little bit, maybe on Substack or something. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I'm writing right now. I'm like, how did you respond to me in 30 seconds then? It's like, oh, I can multitask. And it's like, okay, so that's, if you have read Cal Newport's Deep Work, then you understand that it actually takes hours. I would say 60 to 90 minutes really to start flowing, especially with fiction. Most of my best poems, and like I said, I'm not saying I'm a great poet or anything like that, but to my own personal standard, my best poems were after me trying for 30 minutes and I was able to get into an emotional state somewhere near 45 minutes to an hour, then just kind of like finish it or belt out a whole new version of it and finally kind of realize what the initial idea was about. And that's for a 15-line poem. And so I can imagine fiction is even greater. And I know with my own fiction writing that it is like that. And that's what keeps so many people away from the page. And this is why I think that and why I recommend writing for the trash. And writing for the trash means that every single day you just write 30 minutes of just fun crap, random stories, random things that don't matter, and just throw it away, delete it. It doesn't matter, and just kind of get the energy flowing so then you could be closer to that emotional state. Because I've found that, I wake up and I start writing and maybe some fiction, and then I look back at, 3 hours later, and it's like, dude, the stuff I wrote in the first 30 minutes was trash. I have to go revise all that now or like fix it later. And so that's the level. If you want to write like the greats, that's what they did. But then also they had an editor that in today's money would probably cost you near $10,000 to have someone read your book diligently multiple times, spend hundreds of hours on it. Someone spends 500 hours on your novel, which they should, and which these people had. I mean, they had more than people spend 500 hours on their novel. At $20 an hour, that's already $10,000. So that's like the buy-in to have an editor like the greats did. And then they obviously had a whole marketing team and everything else behind it to get it into our hands and for us to be able to say Don DeLillo is a literary GOAT. And that's what's nice about publishing deals is that, many people at the start of their career are belting out novels and they could be a little bit subpar because the editor can kind of just elevate them. What's funny too is I've been to the Don DeLillo archive actually because it's where the David Foster Wallace archive is, but I didn't really take it very seriously, one could say. I just kind of looked through the files and the early drafts and some of the stuff. But I'm planning next time I go, which will be soon because I'm going to hit the Cormac McCarthy archive when all the new stuff gets released sometime in 2025, the David Foster Wallace archive. But I want to read a Don DeLillo novel like deeply, like read it like 3 times in a row, and then and like one of the ones where they have all like the first draft there, and then go read all the drafts, and then kind of see the evolution, and then see what the editor did, because that's huge, you guys. Like the novels Cormac McCarthy and David Foster Wallace turned in were utterly transformed by their editors and many other people, and so it's something we don't really like to acknowledge and think about because I don't have $10,000 laying around. I don't even have $1,000 laying around, and so it's sad to think that that's what we're competing against, but I'm just letting you guys know. I like that DeLillo takes a break too. Many authors do this. Cormac McCarthy, that's what he said about his work. McCarthy would work on 5 different novels at once, many in the same day, and he said that he would just take a walk between. He would just need to take a walk outside for 20 minutes, and then he could be right back into it. Many authors take walks. Murakami ran every single day. DeLillo lives, I think, in New York. He lives out in Bronxville, which in general, especially back in the 80s, and for someone who's as rich as him, is just kind of like suburban housing. It's pretty smushed together. It's not like he's running in like a forested area, but maybe he goes to a park or something, and then he comes back and gets back after it. Another thing to note is the manual typewriter. And someone left a comment the other day, and they were talking crap about the typewriter. Like, it's too clickety-clackety. It throws me out. And he made a great point that, all throughout time, people wrote longhanded. All the great works, Shakespeare, Chaucer, all of our favorite poets, the Victorians, everyone, they wrote by hand. And that silence, that routine, that connection with the body was great. And that the word processor is almost the best extension of that because it's also silent. And obviously you can speed up, but it's usually a silent routine. But the typewriter with the clickety and the clackety and kind of the friction is hard. But that's kind of the point. And that's why I think the typewriter produced so many great works, is that the friction is what makes it good. Because I've gotten really into CDs and cassettes. I mean, I've always been into CDs because I was born in the era. But my boy Bitpunk, who's also a great poet, got me into cassettes. He sent me a cassette player. He does his podcast on cassettes and sends it out to people. Go check it out, bitpunk.fm or substack.com/bitpunkfm. If I remember, I'll link it down below. But he'll send you a free cassette that has his podcast on it. And, there's a bunch of poetry anyway. But the friction of having to start it and flip it over and rewind and pause and, some of the graininess actually makes the experience much better. And I'm not trying to be like a bro. Here I am. I'm mostly listening to MP3s out here, the most bastardized version of sound. But a little bit of friction can create some massive results. And I think the sound and the routine and what I know about a typewriter could be really important. And I think Hey, that's why, some of another cool thing is those computers that are typewriters now that have the feel of a typewriter, but they're like very minimal computers. Those are really cool. I don't remember what those are called. They should sponsor me, honest. Should send me and my wife one, and I'll plug them every single video. Who cares? I should honestly send them an email. Other topic. But analog with the running with the dedication, I think is a beautiful thing. What would you guys think? How would you respond to that comment about, the word processor and long-handed being connection, but the typewriter is kind of this offshoot that really isn't as effective because of the sound and because of the friction. And so, speaking to all of us normal people out there that maybe don't have 5,000 hours to put into a novel, what I have found is that you could put in a little bit less time, and that many of the works on my shelf that aren't as regarded as highly, there was less time put into them. But first and foremost, they were written by an author with experience. A lot of authors today maybe have an MFA or have tried hard or done a couple novels before that, then they sit down and write a novel, then usually it's also edited. I have very rarely read a self-published work that had 2,000 hours put into it that didn't have an editor that was at a high level that I really enjoy. There's been some entertaining sci-fi stuff I'm sure I've read that have fallen into that category, but stuff that's transformed me, that's just not happened. And it sucks. But being a novelist is a solo enterprise, but at the end of the day, it's not. If you look at a movie set, they're all actors and directors and editors and sound effect people and all the stuff. And same with an album. There's the band and the mixers and the equipment. But many people fall into the trap of thinking because the Kindle era that you can do it all alone. But in actuality, it is somewhat of a cohesive process because you're producing something that's going to take someone 5 or 6 hours to read, and you want them to enjoy that time as much as possible. And if you put some money in, it's like a business. If you put some money in as a self-published author to hire an editor, then in the long run, that's going to pay off because people are going to trust you. Something that's very hard to gain back is reputation and trust. I've been burned by certain authors before, and maybe they've released some masterpieces that I have loved, but I'll come on this channel and dissuade people from reading them. There have been authors who, by spending a little bit more time, maybe hiring a better editor, working on a couple things, would have millions of more readers right now. So you do not want to fall into that trap. And that's what Substack.com, which is where the literary renaissance is taking place and the best place to put your writing out for free right now, is great for, because if you screw up, then and it's out there for free, no one's going to necessarily judge you. They read it for free. Maybe they wasted their time, but they're not going to hate you because they paid $20 and now have to deal with this book. Am I going to throw it away? Am I going to burn it? What am I going to do with this crappy book? And so that is Don DeLillo's writing routine, everyone. That's how I want you guys to frame it and think about it. It's very similar to many other people. Exercise at least 5 hours a day, almost every single day of the week, over 3,000 hours per novel. Boom. That is the word. Have a great day, and I will see you guys later.